Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. It started subtly. Laura, my wife of 10 years, began going out more often, claiming it was for girls' night or brunch with the book club. I didn't think much of it at first. She deserved her space and I trusted her. "Seems like you're going out a lot lately," I'd say, trying to keep the concern out of my voice. "Oh, honey," she'd reply with a warm smile. "It's just how the girls plan things. I might be late, so don't wait up for me." It sounded reasonable, but soon the frequency of her outings increased. What started as once or twice a week became almost every other day. One evening, as she was getting dressed for yet another mysterious gathering, I couldn't help but notice the extra effort she was putting into her appearance. "Wow, you look stunning," I said, trying to hide the knot forming in my stomach. "Thanks, babe," she replied, her voice cheerful but distant. "It's just a casual thing with the girls." Casual? In a sleek red dress and heels that screamed, "Notice me?" Something wasn't adding up. The turning point came 2 weeks later. I was washing my car in the driveway when my neighbor, Mr. Harris, shuffled over. He was an older man with a knack for small talk, but that day his expression was unusually serious. "James, can I have a word with you?" he asked, glancing around as if to ensure no one was listening. "Of course," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Look, I wasn't going to say anything, but I saw something the other day that didn't sit right with me." He hesitated, scratching his head. "There was this young guy, couldn't be more than 23 or 24, leaving your house around noon. I thought you should know." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Noon? I was at work during that time. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, I'm sure. I've seen him a couple of times now. He doesn't stay long, maybe an hour or two." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "Thanks, Mr. Harris. I appreciate it." Inside, though, I was seething. Who was this guy? And why was he in my house when I wasn't there? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and after what my neighbor had told me, I knew I had to find out the truth. The next day, Laura was planning to go out again, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. The idea of her being with someone else was gnawing at me, eating away at my every thought, but I needed more than just suspicion. I needed evidence. That evening, just before she was about to leave, I decided to confront her. I had to. "You're going out again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but failing to hide the frustration creeping in. "We barely spend any time together anymore. This is getting out of hand." She froze, her hand hovering over her purse. I could see the flash of irritation in her eyes before she quickly masked it. "James, I told you," she snapped. "I need my space too. You can't keep telling me not to go out with my friends just because you're uncomfortable with it. You don't own me." Her words stung, more than I cared to admit, and for a moment I just stood there feeling the weight of the distance between us growing by the second. "I just want to know what's going on," I muttered, unable to keep the doubt out of my voice. "You're always gone and I'm left wondering." She didn't even let me finish. "Enough, James." She cut me off, her tone sharp and final. "I need some air. I'll be back later. You'll survive, trust me." She grabbed her keys and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I watched her drive off, and as soon as her car disappeared down the street, a surge of anger and dread flooded me. I had to know where she was going. I couldn't just sit there anymore. Without hesitating, I grabbed my keys, jumped into my car, and followed her. I kept my distance, just enough to not get noticed, but close enough to see. I watched as she turned the corner and drove toward the downtown area. She parked outside a bar I'd never seen her mention before. Not that she ever told me about the places she went anymore. I parked across the street, staying hidden in the shadows, my eyes glued to her car. I waited. The minutes felt like hours. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat telling me that I was about to witness something I couldn't deny. She stayed inside her car, just sitting there. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her, wondering if she was waiting for someone. And then, as if the universe had decided to rip open the truth in that very moment, a young man stepped out of the bar. He was tall, with dark hair and a swagger about him that made my stomach churn. He looked too young, too confident, and my gut screamed that this was the man Mr. Harris had warned me about, the one who'd been sneaking around behind my back. He approached her car. I held my breath, waiting for what I knew deep down was coming. And then, as if on cue, he opened the passenger door and slid into the seat next to her. They exchanged a few words, their heads close together, too close. Then, she leaned in, and before I could react, they kissed. The image burned itself into my mind as if I had just witnessed a part of my life break apart in front of me. I snapped the picture quickly with my phone, but the angle wasn't the best. Too blurry, too rushed. But I had it. That moment would haunt me forever. They didn't stop there, though. The kiss wasn't the end. I watched, helpless, as she started her car and drove off, the young man beside her. My mind reeled with the realization that what I was seeing wasn't a mistake or a one-time thing. This was real. It was happening. She was with him. I followed them at a distance, heart pounding in my chest as I trailed her car through the winding streets leading to the outskirts of town. I tried to convince myself there was some other explanation, but that hope shattered when her car turned into the parking lot of a hotel. I pulled over across the street, gripping my phone with trembling hands. Through the camera lens, I watched them step out of her car. They were close. Too close. She laughed at something he said, her face lighting up in a way that was both unfamiliar and painful to see. Then it happened. She leaned toward him and their lips met again. My breath caught as I snapped a photo, each click of the camera an undeniable confirmation of what I feared most. They lingered in the kiss, her hand brushing his arm in a way that spoke volumes. When they broke apart, they walked toward the hotel entrance, her arm grazing his, her posture relaxed, almost carefree. Like it was nothing. Like I didn't exist. I took another photo, capturing them just before they disappeared inside. Once they were out of sight, I stayed frozen in my car, staring blankly at the entrance of the hotel, struggling to process what I had just witnessed. The anger, the hurt, the disbelief, it all crashed over me in relentless waves, leaving me breathless. My stomach churned as I stared at the images on my phone. Proof. Cold, hard proof of her betrayal. My marriage, the life I thought I had, was falling apart right before my eyes. The next morning I woke up with the weight of it all on my chest. The truth was undeniable now, and I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to take control. I couldn't let this go. Couldn't let her get away with it. I'd had enough of the lies, the deceit. I needed to know how deep this went, and gather the proof I needed to get my revenge. Laura was going out again, and I knew it. So that weekend, while she was gone, I set everything up, installing hidden cameras throughout the house. The cameras were small, discreet, and easy to hide. I placed them in the living room, kitchen, and though it pained me to even think about it, in the bedroom. 2 days later, the opportunity presented itself. That morning over breakfast, I casually told her, "I'll be working late tonight," giving her the space she needed, hoping that she would bring the 23-year-old guy home again. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Okay," she replied, her tone breezy, almost too casual. That evening, I sat at my desk in the office, pretending to focus on the documents in front of me. My heart pounded as I glanced at my phone, staring at the camera app icon. After what felt like hours, I finally opened it. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, the quiet hum of the camera feeds filling the room. For a moment, I thought I might have been wrong, just paranoia clouding my judgment. But then I saw it. The timestamp read 5:43 p.m. The back door opened, and there he was. He walked in like he owned the place. Athletic build, messy dark hair, and a smirk that radiated arrogance. Laura met him in the kitchen, and my worst fears crystallized when she threw her arms around him and kissed him deeply. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I paused the footage, then rewound and played it again, hoping I'd somehow imagined it. But there it was, clear as day. The two of them lingered in the kitchen, talking, laughing. She poured him a drink, her body language unmistakably affectionate. It was a version of her I hadn't seen in months. Then they moved to the living room. He sat on the couch, and she curled up beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. The sight was surreal, like I was watching a stranger in my own home. But the final blow came moments later. Laura stood up, took his hand, and led him toward the bedroom, the room we had shared for 10 years. The door closed behind them, but the implications were unmistakable. Then I switched to the footage from the bedroom, my heart racing as I braced myself. The screen flickered, and there they were, Laura and the young man, their bodies close. They began to undress, each piece of clothing discarded in a careless flurry. I watched, helpless, as they climbed into the bed. My body went cold as I saw them press against each other. The intimacy, the familiarity between them, so raw and so real. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Nausea churned in my stomach as I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me in waves. This was it. The proof I had dreaded but knew I'd find. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the ease, the familiarity, as if they had done this countless times before. My marriage, the life I thought we'd built together, was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. I didn't know how long I sat there staring blankly at the frozen image on my screen. My mind raced, swinging between anger, heartbreak, and a cold, calculating need to expose the truth. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who Laura had become. The next day, I woke with a new resolve. Laura moved around the house as if nothing was amiss, humming to herself as she made coffee. My stomach twisted at the sound. It was so normal, so ordinary, as if she wasn't tearing my world apart. "Good morning," she said brightly, setting a cup of coffee on the counter. I stared at her, barely able to suppress the anger boiling inside me. "Morning," I replied curtly, pretending to sip the coffee. My hands trembled as I thought about the footage saved on my phone. I didn't confront her, not yet. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who believed in us, our families, our friends. They needed to see the truth too. That evening I sat down to go through the footage again, carefully pulling the most damning clips and saving them to a secure drive. The kiss in the kitchen, the cuddling on the couch, and finally, the intimate moments in the bedroom. It was brutal to watch, but I was past the point of tears. This wasn't about hurt anymore. This was war. The following weekend, I invited both of our families over for a dinner party. Laura was surprised but didn't question it. After all, I was the good husband who loved hosting get-togethers. "You sure you're up for this?" she asked as she put on her earrings. "Absolutely," I said, forcing a smile. It's been too long since we had everyone together. By the time everyone arrived, I had set the stage perfectly. The dining table was set, the food was ready, and the atmosphere seemed warm and inviting. Laura chatted happily with her sister while her parents made small talk with mine. Halfway through dinner, I stood up, raising my glass. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Laura looked up, smiling expectantly. "I wanted to take this opportunity to share something important," I continued, walking to the living room where the TV was set up. "What's going on?" Laura asked, her smile faltering. "You'll see," I replied, hitting play on the footage. The room fell silent as the video began. First, the kiss in the kitchen. Gasps echoed around the room. Then, the scene shifted to them on the couch, cuddling. Finally, the clip of their intimate moments in the bedroom. Laura's face drained of color. What is this?" she stammered, standing up. "It's the truth," I said, my voice cold. "The truth about who you really are." Her mother covered her mouth in shock. Her father's face turned red with anger. My own parents stared at her in disbelief. "James," she began, her voice trembling. "Please, we can talk about this." "Oh, we're way past talking, Laura," I interrupted. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now, everyone knows." The room erupted into chaos. Her mother sobbed quietly, her hands shaking as she tried to reach for her daughter. "How could you do this?" she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe her own words. Her father's face had turned crimson with rage. "I always knew you were too good for him, Laura. But this is unforgivable." His words hit like a slap, each syllable a reminder of how badly my trust had been shattered. My parents were no better. My mother just stood there, eyes wide in shock, unable to comprehend the betrayal. My father's gaze, cold and distant, said more than words ever could. Laura stood motionless in the middle of it all, her body rigid with humiliation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as her mind raced to find an excuse, something to save her, but it was too late. Her actions had been exposed, and now she had nothing left but the consequences. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and constant questions from friends and family. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Laura didn't fight it. I don't think she had the strength left to argue, or more likely, she knew it was over. There was no way to salvage what we had once shared. In the end, I wasn't left with much. Just the house, a few belongings, and a heart full of scars. But I had my dignity. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if she ever thinks about what she lost. But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I took back control of my life, and no one will ever take that from me again. Thank you for watching.